Hey, my name's Ovas, and in this video, I'm going to break down my new release out now on Frostfyre Records, Nightfall. Okay, so I guess we'll go starting from the intro and we'll work our way to the outro. So the track opens this very open, spacey vibe. Feedback. Okay. Nothing crazy going on here. We're using this sort of minor 3 to 1 motif sort of thing. Yeah. And we have basically all these washed out reverbed instruments doing the same thing. Choir. Just a pad. This piano's doing the melody here. Except it doesn't really sound like a piano. Yeah, so for this piano here, we have a resonator outlining a C sharp major, or we would really call it D flat major chord here, but it doesn't have the root, so it's just the D flat and the F. And then we have an OTT going here, and then reverb. And that's about it. That's what gives you that sound. We have this super washed out Reese here. And what's actually washing all this out is I have a reverb on the master that I'm automating throughout this whole thing. If I open it up, hey, there we go. Here are all the automations on the master. So we actually start at 91% wet on the entire master right when we start. Or rather, we build up there from 0. And this is really simple patch. Just basically a supersaw with 16 voices. And then just a saw wave with 1 voice that's being layered on top of it. And then low passed. And I really like doing this as opposed to just the 16 voice super saw. Because it gives the low end a lot more body and a lot more rigidity. There's a lot of phasing issues when you only use a super saw for the low end, and I'm not too crazy about it. Not even in tempo. Just creating atmosphere with this choir. And then we have these things which are all frozen actually, so I can't actually show you the patches because I've turned them into audio, but they're not too complicated, so I can kind of explain them anyways. That's literally just a super saw that has reverb on it, and if I extend this, actually I think there's, yeah, see, so that's just a super saw with reverb on it, and then as you let it go out, I just grabbed the tail from that reverb and then faded it in the reverse direction to create this impact, I guess you could call it. And it has delay on it as well. This one is the sort of retro whoosh. that's just an arpeggiated square wave, and it's going from fast to slow. Fairly simple sound. I actually use I use the, well, I can't show, oh, it's going to make a new MIDI track. Well, the arpeggiator here and in Ableton, and instead of sync, I turn it to free, and then you can basically arpeggiate in milliseconds rather than notes. So you can go 1 millisecond at a time, turning it faster or slower. So you get a little more control if you want to do something like that. That's not necessarily on the grid. You're not really arpeggiating it for that purpose. Okay. Now, as we approach the big bass stabs, so I want to talk about something right before here. Right there, all I'm doing is I have a tremolo here, and I believe there's an auto pan as well. Oh yeah, I have two of them. One of them's doing panning, and one of them's acting as a tremolo for the amplitude. And I'm basically just automating that in and making it faster and faster. So it keeps going left, right, loud, soft, as it transitions to this next section. So then you get that really cool. Okay, fun sounds. Let's talk about those. So here's the first one. This gets us settled into our key of E flat minor. So honestly, this song has 145 tracks, and the reason for that is because there's so much layering going on. This song really taught me the importance of layering, honestly, especially when you want to make like color bass, where there's color bassy tunes. It's all about layering. I kid you not. So yeah, let's go through this stab. And the next one is just a different chord, but it's the same thing, essentially. And here we're on an G flat. Yeah. G flat major chord, which is the relative major, I think. Are we on a G flat major? Yeah, let me check. Yeah, we are. Okay. And that sort of just makes it happy because it's the relative major of E flat minor. And I also have these things going on. Oh, here, this is the same thing that was going on in the intro. But you can actually see the arpeggiator here because this one's not frozen. So yeah. And it's literally just a square wave. Okay, let's get into these stacks. So layer 1. Cool stuff. Okay. It is literally just a triangle wave with a phaser filter on it. And that's it. That's for the serum patch. If I were to get rid of everything here, all the effects would just sound like this. Come on. Slow computer. Not that exciting. This resonator is what gives it its main vibe. And I use resonators a lot in this track. Okay. It's just outlining a D sharp minor chord. D sharp minor 7, probably. Is that a 7? 7, 7, 7, 7? Yeah, it is. Okay. And yeah, that's it. That's it. You have some OTT, you have some saturation to beef it up. Oh, and a vocoder. That makes sense. Okay. It's getting saturated to shit and then vocoded to make it actually pleasant sounding. Next. bass. Reese Mess, default serum table. It's being FM'd from a saw wave, 2 octaves up, phaser filter, and effects. Let's see what it sounds like without. Okay, so those are doing a lot. Mostly this EQ here. It's just giving it that valley sort of feel, where you low pass, give it the peak, and then give it the notch, and then bring them together. And that'll give it that yoy effect. Next, okay, we'll go through this. It's basically, I think it's actually the exact same. Oh, there's an extra OTT after, but it's otherwise the exact same as this for post-processing. And obviously EQ is different, but next. That's filling up a lot of the high end. Let's see what's going on here. It is, okay, yeah, that's what it sounds like. So, is this, yeah, just a, whatever this wave is, fake sine wave, I don't know. With some AC hum as the noise and just being distorted. This is actually the exact same patch, isn't it? Yeah, so it's just this. Does this have a sub on? Yeah, I just turned this on, turned this off, and then automated this. And that's it. That's the patch. And that's filling up the high end. That's a fun sound. That is just a phaser filter on some super saws. Yeah, that's literally it. Where's the automation for the volume here? Here it is. Yeah, I like to put, the way I do my super saws is I have one at a certain octave that is less detuned. This one's actually still pretty detuned. If I were using this in a different scenario, it wouldn't be that detuned. And then the one an octave up, that's a little more detuned. And that's it. That's sub. I really like using subs. Like the main sub that I'm using right now is just a sine wave with noise and then tube distortion. And that's basically been what I've been doing in all the songs that I've been making recently. I really like how it comes out, and yeah, just saw plus sine plus tube distortion. I've been using Vital more recently, not when I was making this, because I finished this in November, sometime in November. I can't remember when. And yeah, I've been using Vital because the noise in Vital is actually stereo. So that's nice. That's a plus, I think. So the sub doesn't actually come with stereo, but the high end of the sub sort of does, where the noise is. Okay, so then we go straight, after this, we go straight into the build-up. Okay, let's talk build-up. We have these chords going here. Normally, I wouldn't use that many chords in a build-up, but it fit here, and it was a fairly colorful tune, so why not? So we're going from the 6 chord here to the 3 to the 7 actually, and that wants to resolve too, but it doesn't. It goes back to the 6 when we start the drop. Oh. We'll go through some more things in the build up first though, before we get there. So yeah, build chords. Super saw, tight saw, which is basically just a super saw except way less detuned. Stereo saw, you get 2 different just plain saw waves, give them different phases, and then pan one left, pan one right. I usually like to do 90 as one phase and then 180 as the other, so it's starting when one of them's starting, the other one's already a quarter through its waveform. Terror Squad mid bass, I guess. And then a sub. Vocal going on here. And yeah, just saturated and then super saturated with some reverb. And then some arps. Again, fairly simple sound design. There's nothing crazy going on. It's basically just like square wave here, detuned saw wave there. What else? Hold on, let me see this whole thing. Bass, oh yeah. Obviously the bass is fading in from the drop, which starts as like a super, it's basically just bandpass plus reverb, and that's how I do all my bass fade-ins before drops. Riser, just frozen, simple riser. Yeah, I just made in Serum. It's just a square wave. Yeah, okay. 16 voices, super saw, and then one octave above that, square wave. And it starts off really detuned, and yeah, the saw wave is getting less detuned, and then the square wave is getting more detuned as it goes on. So that's cool. White noise. Fade in. Skybreak psychoacoustic sample. Because why not? Ride. Always include hats and rides in your build-ups, because without it, it just sounds so plain if you don't. Like, listen to that and then compare it to if I turn it on. You need it. And yeah, obviously it's just a kick roll here with a reverse kick over here, I guess, going into the build. And then the pre-drop sample is just, it's just this fill right here, snare with a snare roll. And yeah. And some toms here too. And now we go into the drop. So throughout this first drop, and somewhat the second drop as well. More the first drop though. I'm doing these switches every 4 bars. And here I'm using a 6-to-1 motif. So I start on the 6th chord and basically stay there for the entire first 4 bars. And then we go down to the 1, where it gets a little bit heavier. And the hats in this first section are in 8ths. And then they switch to 16ths in the second section. Okay, let's get into some of these basses now. So I guess we would call the main bass of this track is this. This is actually one of probably the more simple ones in the entire track, actually. That's the main bass sample. Nothing too crazy going on in post. This is fill coded here, which is kind of making the highs a lot more pleasant. I find vocoders are really nice in taming the high end. They can be sometimes. They're not always useful, but they often are. Yeah. Again, just FMing from a saw wave with ReCMS and using a low pass filter here. Okay, yeah, so the serum effects are doing most of the work here. I'm assuming it's mostly this distortion, and then I'm just using this EQ here to bring out the vowels. So we have the basically just really simple before everything else comes in. And then we have the distortion, beefing it up a little, hyperdimension to give it some width, EQ, giving it that valley sound effect, except instead of the notch, I'm using a peak here, which also works. It's a different vibe. And then OTT to bring everything up. And then finally, we have a saturator here, which is basically just crushing the entire sound into this. And then next, for the second layer, this is basically the same sound that we went over earlier on from here. Except it's just going slower and it's drier. So, yeah. And this is what's giving it the melody. So you can see here the top notes. And then we just have a sub. Or no, that's not a sub. More high end, I guess. Same patch, yeah. I guess I just figured I need more high end. So, did I make a separate subs channel for everything here? Sub. Where's the sub? I'm lost. Oh, what? Oh, I'm an idiot. There's a sub built into the first. Listen. The sub's built into the first space. If it sounds good, it's good. You don't always need a separate sub. Okay. I don't think that's a very exciting sound. I mean, it is. I don't know if I want to go through every bass in this thing, though. They're all mostly the same thing. It's just Reese messes with saturators beefing them up. Top noise. More chords. Sub. And then we have this, so it would sound really empty with just these two elements. We have something going on with reverb here. Ah, there it is. Okay, so we have this reverb here, basically fading in as this starts. So if we just solo this. And that gives it a lot of nice ambiance. In terms of what's in the background here. ARP, that is low pass, and later, does it become unlow passed? I believe right here. Yeah, in the break section after the drop. Fillers. Just following the melody there with another bass. Super distorted, filtered saw wave here. Basically just like a deadmau5 pluck that's just completely destroyed. Okay, and then now we go into the section right here. So we have a brass. Oh, that's fading. Okay, so we have, again, this bass kind of goes throughout the whole thing. So that bass is the same one that happens here. It's just going from a B to an E flat. And then we have these sort of call and response things going on here. So this first bass here sounds pretty similar to this. I wouldn't be surprised if okay, this one's a Reese Mess 2, but it's basically the same idea. Low pass filters. Just low pass all your basses. If you want it, low pass it and then bring it up with distortion and then add vowel with EQ. And you're basically set. Basses don't need to be super complicated, honestly. As long as you're like layering stuff. Like, you're good. This is cool. The resonator is doing most of the work here. Yeah, it's basically just a super saw with a resonator on it. But the super saw is playing a super low note. And then this one's just the super saw playing as is, plus sub. Super messy alone, but it fits. That's basically just picking up the low, the low mids. There's some high. I believe that's the same patch. And probably just bringing it up. Might be. And again, since I want it to be somewhat color basey, just chords plus resonators, and you're good. And then this sub is basically just has a lot of high end actually, and it's filling in a lot of the high end here, because without it, there's not a lot of high end, so you don't really hear it that much when you're playing the entire song, but it does add to it. Okay, and then we have this chord stack fading in into this, which is just, again, chord stack, lead. Pretty simple lead, sounds like. It's literally just a super saw with portamento. Okay, and then it's basically just the same thing, but with different melodies and patterns. And then we go into the break. Drums actually get heavier in the break rather than the drop having the heavy drums. It's a bit unorthodox, I guess, but sounds cool, and that's kind of the vibe I want to go for. We have this sort of cute clap going at the beginning, and then we have this sort of rhythm clap going on in the heavier switch sections, and then during the break, we switch to these full-on heavy dubstep drums. And I wanted this super euphoric feel, which is why I have a giant tail here. Without it, wouldn't really sound the same. So that really adds to the vibe there. Yeah, apart from that, it's fairly simple. It's just this lead going on here. One octave above, and then one octave below. This is the main one, I guess you could call it. And it's just a square wave and a saw wave that both have sync on them. It's not really automating a lot of the sync. If you want to make cool leads, it's basically just comes down to square and saw waves with the sync automation. If I wanted to automate it more, I would usually use the sync with the window, and what that basically does is just fades out the edges. Not necessarily in this case, because I'm not going past one. I'm not going to the next waveform. I stop, and it's not that major of an automation. But if I were, I would probably do that windowed. And this just sounds like a super saw. And there's a square one octave above it. These are frozen, which makes me think that my computer was exploding while I was making this, so I froze it. I guess I could unfreeze it for this. I'm gonna hope my computer doesn't blow up. Alright, we're fine. So this is a pretty classic way that I make my chords. I basically make it the same way all of the time. So you already saw the breakdown in the build-up, and it's basically the same here. except I have a bunch of delay going on. Because, again, I wanted that really euphoric feel after the drop. The drop is super dry and super tiny. It's really not a big drop. So I wanted this to be sort of contrasting in that. So it's just like super huge, super wet. So we basically just have these angry saw type thing. It's not actually angry saws. It's just super high and super detuned saw waves. I don't have, where's it from? I don't even know what plugin Angry Saws is from, but you probably know the preset. It's pretty classic. And this is basically just an emulation of that without the noise. Super Saw, which you can see my same sort of strategy of having one octave below and one octave higher, and then the one that's below is a little less detuned than the other. Tight Saw, Pan Saw. And here we just have a growl bass. Just monster with bend. Pretty classic. And then a sub. Okay. What else is cool here? Super fast arpeggiating ARP with a tremolo on it. So without it would just sound. Yeah. What's this? What is this title here? Respace layer. That's not even a respace, but sure. Oh, res bass, probably resonance. Yeah, okay. This is literally just... Oh, this is actually like just a saw wave with one super saw, one octave above. So if we turn off all the resonating, it probably sounds pretty basic. Yeah, you can hear that. And we have a tremolo here. And then 2 OTTs. Do we have 3? No, okay, 2. 2 OTTs with a resonator on a D sharp minor chord, D sharp minor 7 chord. And we have, so this is, oh yeah, this is fading in during the drop, so that's a smooth transition to the break, and then it just acts as an intro. So you can kind of already hear the chords building by the time you're in the drop. And we have some ARPs here. And this is by far my favorite ARP in the entire song. It sounds kind of weird by itself, but when you put it in with everything else, it sounds pretty cool, I think. It's subtle, but it's there. And yeah, that's basically all there is for the... I keep calling it the break. Is it really a break? The drop, the thing after the drop, whatever that is. Okay, and then we go into this super reverbed up section, and we're coming in with some elements from the beginning, and also where is it? And this is a piano that's getting super saturated and distorted with some overdrive as well. And then with the guitar layered on top of it from Labs. Labs is amazing. Probably the best free instrument library ever. With his wind chime preset from Labs as well, giving it some of that. With a warm super saw bass underneath. And then that's when we start with the vocal chops coming in that are getting us ready for the, I guess this would be the actual break. Okay, so this part continues. And we have these saturated vocal chops. Also, they are being vocoded by something. Oh, just a saw wave. Yeah, now if you listen to it, you can hear it. An ARP. Just a square wave with OTT. And then mid bass, which is just super saw. It's not even that low. It's not really a bass. But it adds, once you add this sub on top of it, they sort of blend into one. Okay. Here is a cleaner sort of garage bass than the one that was in the intro, because the intro was meant to sort of be a little bit muddy, more reverbed out. Here, I am actually using, for the sub part of the bass, only a triangle wave. And you can see right here that I have this B oscillator, which is the super saw, actually being high passed. So that none of that super phasey sub is getting through. And it's basically getting all carried by here. Because what happens if I didn't have this? Say I just left it like this. It's super muddy, and because of phasing issues, when you detune a saw wave like this with multiple voices of each other, the amplitude isn't constant, and neither is the pitch, actually, really. So that's why I'm doing this. So you still get that super saw, that warm super saw feeling, but the sub is a lot cleaner. And yeah, that's basically it for this. I guess we can go through the drums, but they're not even that complicated. And here we have yet another kick and then some rim. So one of them's totally washed out, and then one of them still has their transient. Fairly weak kick, but you don't need a lot. It's enough to cut through what is there. And then this is literally just percussions that have, and they're just in 16th notes. Nothing too complicated here. Okay, and then we go straight into the build up here. What note is that? Doom. We're on a B, so we're on a 6 again. So I use a lot of just like 6-1 as the main motif, I guess, in this entire song. It's basically just, this buildup is basically just using elements from this break here and then using a kick roll to build everything up with some risers and stuff. And this doesn't have a pre-drop. As you can see, the sub starts going up in pitch as well. So it doesn't, there's no chord progressions in this one, and it doesn't stay at a constant pitch either. Everything starts rising. And then this is the second drop, which is honestly my favorite part of the song. I think it's really interesting, and I really like how it came out. Probably like my favorite thing that I've ever made, honestly, is this part right here. So let's get into it. Okay, so there is some wacky stuff going on here. Oh no, I'm using cymatics, hat loops. The police is gonna come after me. Oh no. So we have 4 against 3 going on in the hats already. Which I guess, I don't know if you guys would be able to hear that, but... yeah, polyrhythm. And then everywhere else, we kind of have a swing going on. And then here, we are, I mean, technically we're on the grid in 64th notes, but it's not really how you hear it. It's just sort of laid back. That's why you get this laid back, out of time feel. And then this one, yeah, this one here is just delayed by 3/16 notes. Or no, what are these? 3/32 notes. So a dotted 16th. Yes. And then this is sort of a 4-3 feel here, but it's 4-3 while being laid back. I also really like these basses here. Just growl. Yeah. This is the main one. This is actually a custom wavetable of mine that I guess has no name. But yeah. With low pass plus being distorted to hell, and then we have this EQ giving it this format, which you can hear most of the sounds coming from there. And it sounds like this is doing something phasery. Nope, it's not. Okay, it's just vocoded. Okay, this has a phaser on it. Yeah, it's basically the same idea in terms of the patch. But this one actually has, okay, here. This is a phasery growl. So this has a phaser 48 plus filter, which is a great filter if you want to make these phasery sounding growls. Plus a phaser over here. Plus a phaser in Ableton. Ableton's phaser is pretty great, I think, for making these sort of growls. It's not as aggressive as like some other phasers you might find, but I kind of like it that you can sort of make it static. Because in these sound design sessions or whatever, it's a lot more useful. And then what's this? Ooh. So this is I froze something here. I don't remember what I turned into audio. It honestly just sounds like I slapped a resonator on something and then just made the resonator completely dissonant and out of key. And then, yeah, that's basically it. That's what would give that sound. Complete and utter mess. It's just distortion. If this wasn't here, it'd probably just sound. Yeah. Okay. Sound design with Ovas, okay? Just distort the hell out of anything you want and then just put a filter on there and make it vowely. There you go. Now you have dubstep. Congrats. More chords. Sub. This sounds real phasery. Yeah, we have a phaser filter here. Auto receive plus a flanger, plus a phaser, plus huge EQ points here. Yeah, that's giving it a lot of a vowel sound right there. And Reese Mess again with this AC hum. It's the default serum noise, but I really love it. It's just so gritty, and it sounds so terrible, but it's good. Just this lead that's going over it as well, with some super annoying peaks here. But it fits in. It makes it just so that it's enough to not bother you. Like if it was like this, it's not a main element, but it's there and it's helping it. Okay, and then we go into this last section here, which is basically just this right here. Except with LFOs and stuff, plus the same, I think it's, basically the same drums here, right? Except with the snare tail from earlier. And then I have these occasional fillers here. Yeah, so I'm just using it. Stop. That didn't help. There we go. I'm just using an auto filter here with the saw wave. And that's it. That's literally the only thing differentiating the two. If I turn this off. It's the exact same chord stack from earlier. And that's basically it. The same thing goes for the lead. I just put an auto filter on it. Actually, it is the exact same patch. It's literally the exact same. I didn't even duplicate it for both of these. Okay. And that's basically it. Some fade out here. Just took this, recorded it into a different, resampled it into a separate audio, and then just put reverb on it. You have this again, and then basically the same thing from here, except the only thing that's added is these bells, and there's no sub. Future OS here. I am currently in the middle of editing this breakdown, and I just realized that I didn't go over the master earlier, so I figured that I'd go over that now. Okay, so here we are in the project again, and basically this is sort of split up into, I guess, I don't know if you would call it a pre-master, but things that are on that master but aren't necessarily your traditional master. And then your actual master, which is basically making things loud and making things sound cool and professional. So in terms of what I'm talking about here, if we have a bunch of things that are being modulated, I want to go over these. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plugins right here are basically what I'm talking about when I say they're on the master chain and they're effects that are affecting everything on the master, but they aren't really the master. Okay, so first, I already discussed what these tremolos are doing, which is basically adjusting the pan and adjusting the amplitude in this transition right here. And that is the only time they ever get turned on, I believe. Where is it? Yeah, that's the only time they're ever used. Next, this reverb here, which I sort of discussed, I guess. So in the intro, it's being automated to go up like that, and then it falls back down to 0 right when the chords come in. It ducks down and then comes back up. And then in the build up, it also comes back up to 20%. And this is what you would call a washout effect, and just happens before the build up. And also right here, as the drop is ending, I believe, that's when the reverb kicks up into 53%. That number probably doesn't matter. It's just it's becoming really, really wet right before the break ends. Right before the drop ends and the break begins. And then I have it again before the garage break. It kind of comes up. We have reverb again there. And then again at the build up, of course. And then when the drop is ending. And then also at the end of the track right here, when it's fading, sort of everything's fading out. It just goes all the way up to 100% there. Okay, I also have a utility here that is automating a couple things, including the volume and the stereo width. We'll go over, I guess, volume first, which is, where's that? Right here. So this is just during the build up, and because a lot of things are being washed out and reverb is being added, I'm taking out lows during the build. I make it get louder, which in this case, it worked. Sometimes it can be counterintuitive. Sometimes it goes the other way. I want to make things quieter during the build-up so that the drop hits heavier. It all depends on what you're doing, but here I made it louder. And also over here, when it's really washed out into the transition. So I'm basically just using that whenever there's a lot of reverb to counteract when you're adding reverb and increasing the wet signal on the reverb, that's going to decrease the volume. So I'm just basically using that to counteract that effect right there. Okay, next we can go, I guess, straight into this EQ right here, where basically there are two things we need to focus on. It is this high shelf here at around 700 hertz and this low shelf here at about 150. So with the low shelf, we are decreasing the volume during the buildups and also during any transition periods of the lows. This is a really good technique that you should use in all your buildups. You don't want a lot of lows before the drop hits because that can sort of clutter things up. So I'm just taking that down about 7 decibels so that when the drop does hit, all the lows come in and it feels a lot fuller. Now, in terms of the high shelf, I am using this, just at the end here. And this bandpass sort of filter forms over here. And now we get into the actual sort of master making things loud. I like to now all my masters are a little bit different. They're essentially all the same idea, but there's no like special magic master chain that's going to make everything sound perfect on every song. It honestly depends on the song. So like these techniques can be applied to other songs, And even these same plugins can be used on other songs. I do use these same plugins on all my other songs, basically. It's not that complicated. It's just a matter of fine-tuning it to the song that you're working on. So there's an OTT here just on 12%. This is basically standard for me. OTT is just it stands for over-the-top multiband compression, and that's what it is. So by just increasing a little bit of that wet signal there, and I mean a little, like 12% is the most you want to go. You don't even need it really. But I enjoy it. It kind of just, it compresses everything just a little bit more. And that's why I use that. Now, this is one of my favorite plugins I want to talk about next, TDR Nova. This is a multiband equalizer, and it's free. And if you don't have it, just get it because it is so useful. And so basically, it's an equalizer, and you get to compress each of these bands differently. So I'm just using this to compress a lot. It helps a lot in the lows, because when you have your kick hitting, typically the kick just makes the lows go all crazy and makes the lows really loud whenever the kick hits. And it can be really tough to get a loud master because of your kick. That's usually the first thing, at least in my mixes, I find, that ends up distorting is the kick. So this, I use it on everything, basically. The thing that'll be compressed the most, as you see, I'll demonstrate it, is the low end, but I'll use it on every band equally. And it just honestly gives it a really nice uniform sound. Even you saw there with this second band here around 400 hertz, it helps a little with the snare transient. So it just brings everything together a little more. It's not doing anything too crazy. You can definitely go overboard with it. Attack and release are 20. So it's not super short that it's like distorting or whatever, or really affecting the transients. Same thing, that's why the attack's 20, because I don't really want to affect the transients too much with that. And then here's where the majority of the stuff happens, I guess, is in ozone. So yeah, here's my master EQ. Again, this is like purely, a lot of the times when I'm making a song, I'm mixing stuff, but I'm not mixing it to a reference. So even if it all sort of sounds good, as soon as you compare it to another song, the EQ is going to be off in terms of where those frequencies all sit. So this is basically what I use EQ on the master for. So you can see here, I'm basically just, this is quite, oftentimes it doesn't get this harsh. This is actually a pretty harsh EQ on the master, but it works. It's honestly, in this stage here, I can't really model it, but this is where I would use my reference, and I would get a different song that I really like that sounds similar, and I would try to EQ this song mid and side separately to sound as similar as I can to that song. I also have a brick wall high cut at 20 hertz on the mono side, and a brick wall low pass at 20,000 hertz. This is just cutting stuff beyond what humans can hear that can clutter up your mix and just give you that little tiny bit of extra headroom when you go into your master. Same thing here with the low pass at 20,000 hertz, except here there's a brick wall high pass at 110 hertz. This is cutting off all sub in the side. You don't really want sub in your side. It depends. It's a general rule. You can break in certain genres, like if you're doing something cinematic or orchestral, if you're working with piano. But generally speaking, if you're making EDM, cut off all your subs in your stereo field. Even like if I play it, there's probably not a lot because it's a habit to mine to do anyways, but there will probably be some stuff there. Yeah, so there is some stuff here. Okay, I don't like this, how this is visualizing this. Let me get an Ableton EQ here to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if I turn off this low pass here, everything that's residing over there, you don't need and you shouldn't have. So again, because of EQ issues, EQs aren't perfect. There's still going to be some distortion, especially after you go in the master, but it does help. Okay. Now with the limiter, yeah, I'd say these are pretty standard settings for me. These normally don't change. Maybe the release, depending what I'm doing, but it usually stays on 1. Intelligent release control 2. I enjoy it better. I find it keeps the transients more snappy. Release of 1. If you bring your release of too high on your limiter, it'll start sounding very. It'll automate the volume too much, and it'll sound compressed. You bring it too low, it'll start distorting. So you need to find the point in the middle here. Stereo independence, I bring it up to 50 in terms of both the transient and sustain. This just means that like it's going to limit the stereo field separately than the mono field. I don't go too crazy with this. The reason I don't push it up to 100, it would make it louder, but it sounds really weird when your stereo field ends up getting way too high, and it's like your mono's being super compressed and then your stereo's not, and it's all being limited. So don't go too crazy with this. Transient emphasis, I like that as well. Ozone's limiter, honestly, in terms of limiters, it's my favorite. And then here, I have soft clipping here, is Ableton's glue compressor. This is one of my favorite tools to use on the master. In this case, it's not doing much. It's just pushing it an extra 1 decibel, because the threshold here is actually negative 0.5, which is why I have a utility here, pushing it up an extra 0.5. So after the limiter, I'm just pushing it another decibel with soft clipping. In some cases, I'll only use the ozone limiter. In some cases, I'll only use soft clipping. It really depends on what I want. I find soft clipping, it'll typically push things louder with more distortion. So it might work if I'm working on something like super heavy. Then I can just use soft clipping, and it'll work. And in this case, I'm only turning on the soft clipping and pushing in that extra decibel when we get to the drops. And that just gives the drops that extra bit of oomph that it needs to stand out amongst everything else that's going on. And yeah, now I guess we're fully done this breakdown. That is the entirety of the Nightfall breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed that and hopefully learned something from it. Really proud of that song. So if you haven't heard the full thing yet, I'd really appreciate if you went and take a listen. So yeah, see you.